Hello learners, so we talked a lot about muscle movement in relation to origin insertions, muscle actions, levers, and of course, fascicle arrangements. And now we get into the fun part, which is muscle naming. And I'll tell you straight up, some of these muscle names be beating me down to the ground, throwing me, flipping me, throwing me up under the railroad tracks, whatever you want to call it, and especially since my brain likes to, I talk very fast, if you haven't noticed, so my brain likes to like talk faster than I can actually speak out. And I end up like butchering stuff. So I'm going to slow down. Okay, that's going to be number one. But it also just kind of contributes to the fact that muscles can be very overwhelming due to their names. I mean, there's over 600 muscles. Of course, we're only having you, memorize a small portion of that. And even in that portion, you only need about 19, I believe, that you have to know, like the origin, the insertion, the function/action, and the location. Everything else you just need to know the location of. Okay, but part of that sometimes is going to be with muscle naming. And each part of that muscle name can have meaning, right? So we're going to try our best to go group things together, get a little example, and then after this, we're going to be going into the actual muscles on our muscle list. That's where the big chunk of this information is going to be coming. Now, ultimately, hopefully you can realize that by understanding muscle naming, you can figure out where a muscle is located, what they are, right? What they do, and the number of attachments they have, their shape, their size, so many details, okay? And that means that when you're in an exam and you see this muscle name, they're like, hey, locate this. You're like, what are they asking me about? You can start breaking it down and thinking to yourself, okay, let me start breaking down pieces of the name itself. Maybe that can help me figure out the location. Maybe that can at least help me figure out the size. So if you see something that's really bigger, way bigger than the muscle that you're supposed to be focused on, you know that that name is going to be a part of that size. Little details like that can be very useful to help you remember. So there's many factors that, of course, are going to influence the muscle naming. And if you can recognize them and identify them, it can help you remember the muscles overall and, of course, their function too. So first is going to be body region. Then we can actually have names that are going to be related to shape, names related to size, piece of the name that's related to the muscle action, so what it does, its function. Also the direction of muscle fibers, the location of their attachments, and the number of heads. So the number of heads means you're talking about the number of organs that that muscle has. So when we talk about the biceps brachii, we're talking about bi means two, so it has two heads or two areas of origin. Triceps has 3 heads or 3 areas of origin. Quadriceps has 4 heads or 4 areas of origin. That's what you're thinking about. All right, before we get into our examples that we see in the pictures here, I kind of want to give some examples of each of the little pieces of the name. Okay, so body region. Well, let's think of a couple of examples. We are heard of biceps, right? We're like biceps down, but especially biceps brachii at this point. Okay, but we also can have the biceps femoris. Now, biceps are the same in these names, but brachii and femoris are telling us the different regions. So you're saying, okay, well, I don't understand. Okay, how do I distinguish between biceps brachii and biceps femoris? Well, biceps, again, is telling us the number of heads. So you know you're going to have an origin of 2 here and 2 here. But femoris is around the thigh, whereas brachii is going to be in the upper arm. Or you can also say the brachial region of the arm. Now let's get into shape. Shapes are just like the shapes we learned. Circles, squares, right? But for us, we're going to upgrade that a little bit. So we know things like the trapezius muscle, so named because it looks like a trapezoid. And it doesn't look exactly like a trapezoid, let's be honest, but it looks similar to a trapezoid, okay? Also, we can have the deltoid, that deltoid muscle or our shoulder cap muscle that we saw. And delta means triangle, okay? So a lot of times if you're thinking of other classes like chemistry, for example, like the change in this, final minus initial, that delta symbol is where we're kind of thinking of our deltoid. It's probably going to be some kind of triangle shape. We also can have rhomboid. If you're thinking of rhomboid, it's probably going to be thinking of some kind of diamond shape, okay? And that can definitely help us distinguish there. Now, you also can have situations where you have the same name, but the sizes are different. So one example here, we have the gluteus maximus. So that's going to be the larger muscle in the actual rear end, okay? But you also can have the gluteus minimus. So that's going to be a smaller muscle. That's usually deep to the actual gluteus maximus in this like area right here, okay? Again, it's to change in size. So sometimes that second word will tell you the region. Sometimes the second word is going to tell you how large or small it is. So it's in the same region, in the gluteal region, but one is larger and one is smaller. What other examples can we come from this? Well, you also might see longus and brevis, meaning long or short. Okay, so just keep that in mind as well. You also might see major or minor. Okay. And that can also help distinguish between, hey, we know this muscle's in the same kind of general region, same area, but it's going to be a smaller one versus to one that's larger. All right, let's talk about muscle action. Now, muscle action, remember, is telling you the type of movement you're dealing with, and that different movement is going to be based on a lot of different muscles playing their own roles, right? So you can say, okay, we are going to be doing adduction. We're going to be extending, extender. We're going to be using flexion, like a flexor, right? We have all those different ones that we can talk about. So let's get into an example. Like, say, for example, you have the, let me write this down here, the adductor longus. So it's telling us the size, it's telling us it's the longest, so it's really long, and it also is telling us the muscle action, adductor. So it's going to be adducting that overall muscle. That's the movement, okay? And if it's adducting, that means you're going toward the midline. And usually if you're going toward the midline, you're talking about the adductor longus, it is attached to the thigh. So you can start adding more layers to it if you like as well. Another thing we see is the extensor, like we see here, extensor digitorum muscle. Now we saw the extensor digitorum longus muscle, and we said the extensor digitorum longus muscle was going to be a muscle that's going to be in your lower leg. Whereas you can see here, the extensor digitorum by itself is going to be in the forearm. Now, in some textbooks, of course, as you go higher in your own education, you see that it will be called also the extensor digitorum minimus to talk about being in the forearm area. But if it just stated extensor digitorum, that means, again, you're doing extension. Digitorum is towards the digits. This time it's going to be the fingers, okay? And it is not going to be in the actual lower leg. Whereas extensor digitorum longus is going to be a longer muscle. So that means it's definitely not going to be the forearm. And it's going towards the digits, which is the foot. So the only option would be to be in your lower leg towards your toes. Okay, so just keep with those little details as well. This one has the region, and it also has the actual action. Okay? And if you add more details like the size, that'll tell you exactly where it's going to be. The lower leg or the foot, or the forearm. Also, we can have direction of muscle fibers. So back when we saw, let me go back, when we saw our overall rectus abdominis here, this is a perfect example. We saw that we said that the parallel fibers are kind of going straight down, And so that straight is what we mean by different locations here, or direction of the muscle fiber. So if it's going straight, we know it can be the rectus abdominis. If it's going at an angle, we can call that the obliques, that we'll talk about later. If it's going crosswise, you can look at those as transverse. Sometimes the direction of the muscle fiber is right there in the name. So rectus, when you're thinking of rectus here, like rectus, that rectus means straight direction of the muscle fibers. Abdominis means that you're in the abdomen. They're usually at the abdominal wall. Location of the attachments. This is going to basically, these are like my favorite ones because they are easier. They have the longest, strangest names, but they're easier to understand. So one perfect example is the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Now we know that's going to be, again, having origins on the sternum and our clavicle, and then of course insertion at the mastoid process of our temporal bone. But in the name itself, it helps us understand those things. So anytime you're talking about location of attachments, there's always going to be a same type of setup. You're going to start with the name bringing out the origin, and you're going to end with the name bringing out the insertion. Okay? So sternocleido is where the origin is, mastoid is where the insertion is. So I like these kind of names when it's focused on location of attachments because you're like, okay, well, I can just focus mainly on where the origin is, where the actual insertion is, mastoid, and it's going to make it easier for me to locate those muscles as well. You can have the number of heads or origins, like we said. Sometimes they'll call them heads, or sometimes you can say origins as well. Okay? I like to say origins in my head because it just keeps me kind of thinking origin insertion, but you can do whatever you like. Now, this means the number of heads / origins that's going to split at the ends of a muscle. Okay, so we know the ends of a muscle. Let's say we have a muscle here, we have an insertion, we have our origin. We're saying that, yes, we'll have your insertion, but now your origin can be at 2 different points. Okay, examples, the biceps brachii. Bi means that you're going to have 2 origins. Bicep femoris. Bi means you're going to have 2 origins. Okay, triceps brachii. Tri means you're going to have 3 origins. So bi, 2 heads. Tri, 3 heads. Quadriceps. Quad means you're going to have 4 origins. Quad, 4 heads. There you go. Okay. Now let's go ahead and get an example here, which is going to be our example before we get into our real example, which is the rhomboid major. Well, remember we said about major. Rhomboid major, rhomboid minor probably, because major and minor go hand in hand when we're talking about what? The size. And major should be larger than minor. I know this is going to be a larger muscle, okay? But also we know that it's going to have a smaller counterpart or a minor counterpart. Another thing we see from this name is going to be what? The shape. Rhomboid is going to be like that diamond shape. Okay? Not perfect. The diamond shape you saw up here, but that's what you see. So it's giving you the shape and the size of this muscle just by its name itself. Let's go ahead and get into some examples. That's going to kind of bring these things together. Some of them are going to have more than just one. Location of attachments, again, number of heads. You can have muscle action, the size, the shape. Some of these are going to come together in different ways. Let's go ahead and get into it. Now this says the table below lists several muscles. Put a check in the box if the muscle's name involves a particular name and conviction. That means, does it involve body shape or body region, shape, size, muscle action, direction of fibers, location of attachments, or number of heads, which we also know means number of origins. Now I am going to tell you that, again, you're probably not going to be breaking down names in this way at all. But just by understanding the name, that can help you with memorization, location, and of course what they do as well. So just keep those in mind. Now, the first one is going to be biceps femoris muscle. We don't care about muscle, okay, because we already know we're talking about muscle. So sometimes that can like make you feel like, what is going on here, right? But let's think of biceps first. Biceps means that we know we're going to have 2 heads or 2 number of origins. So I can put a check mark there. Femoris means that we know what body region we're in. If you're talking about femoris, then you're thinking of the thigh. So it might be helpful to go back to good old chapter 1 when we're talking about body region and stuff, and start just refreshing yourself with those names. It really will help with the muscles as well. Okay? Next, brachioradialis. Brachioradialis. So again, break down that word. Brachial means what? It means that you're dealing with the upper arm. Radialis means that you're talking about the radius, which is going to be a part of the forearm. Yeah, I need to write that down. It's going to be a part of the forearm here. And what can we do? We can do with that information. Let's put forearm here. Well, that means we can go ahead and figure out the location of these different attachments. Choose a location of attachments first. Well, think about it. We're talking about brachioradialis. We're starting with the origin, and then we're talking about the insertion right after. So brachial is going to be the upper arm, the insertion is going to be the forearm, and so that's one way you can be like, oh, this is just like sternocleidomastoid. So we're talking about location of attachments. What else can we actually check mark here, though, as well? I can also check mark body region because I know it's going to be the forearm and I know it's going to be the upper arm in order to understand that muscle. Let's go ahead and look at transverse abdominis. Automatically, I know I am going to be dealing with body region because I'm dealing with the abdominal wall, right? Abdominis. What else am I going to be dealing with? Well, transverse, when we talked about rectus, we talked about oblique, we talked about transverse when it comes to abdominal muscles, okay? Transverse means you're going to have that crosswise type of muscle. Rectus means they're very straight. Oblique means that the muscle fibers are at an angle, okay? So transverse has to do with direction of fibers. So 2 there. Now let's talk about the serratus anterior muscle. So anterior, what is that anterior is going to tell us? It's going to tell us it's somewhere in the anterior portion of the body. So will that help us with body region? Sure. But what about serratus? That's not one of the things we particularly pulled out when it came to muscle naming. But one thing I think of when I think of serrate is going to be a serrated knife, right? So you have a serrated knife. So this muscle also looks kind of like a serrated knife. It's going to be the interior of the actual body. So we know it's going to be in the front. Serrated, we also know the shape of that muscle as well. Do we know the size or muscle action, direction of fibers, location of attachments, number of heads? No. We can, from this name, deduce the body region, it's going to be anterior, and also the shape, which is going to be serratus. Now, when we see this muscle later on, we're going to learn that serratus is going to be this jagged-like muscle that's going to be attaching along the ribs, okay? And it's going to help to basically pull the shoulders forward. So if you just set up straight right now and just pull your shoulders forward, you feel the sides of your ribs, yes, that's your serratus anterior muscle helping with that. Next, let's get into the flexor hallucis brevis. Automatically, we know that we're dealing with the muscle action because I see flexor here. So we're bending something. Then we're also dealing with some type of body region, right? That's what I'm talking about. Because I see hallucis, and hallucis is also part of the body region, meaning hallux, which is your big toe. So that's another thing. Again, going back to review those body regions can be very helpful. And then finally, we have brevis, and brevis is going to tell us what? Well, we have longest, which is telling us how long the muscle is, and then we have brevis, which is telling us how short the muscle is. So that's going to help us with size, okay? So flexor hallucis brevis is going to tell us the body region, the size, and the muscle action. Is this going to tell you exactly where the muscle is and all the function of it? No. Which is by helping the name will get you in the general area at least to push forward, especially if you have a situation where you just start blanking or don't remember things on the exam. That can be very helpful to you. What is the purpose of the muscle name? It's not for you to go around and be like, this, et cetera, et cetera. It's for you to be able to, again, organize yourself to help you remember. Why? Because we're about to get into our muscles list. So I want you to go to the muscle list that was probably given to you in lab, or you can go straight to what? The study guide. Remember, I'm answering study guide questions through all my videos. That's how I'm trying to make sure that you're focused on the study guide for the exam. If you go back, you'll see that I'm answering all those questions well. And questions I'm not answering, a small amount, you can go again to your textbook, use the actual active reading guides, whatever you need to. And of course, use other people's videos. Some folks have a better explanation than I do, right? And use your research in your textbook. Use, any of the YouTube channels you see on the home page. You go there and click note-taking and study strategies, and then you scroll all the way down, you'll have other YouTube channels there as well. But the whole goal is for us to understand muscles, okay? So we got to get into our muscles list, get that study guide, or get your muscle list out, and this is going to be based on understanding muscles, based on what we know. So we need to make sure that we understand that muscles work in coordinated teams. That means when one group does, the other one undoes. And we saw that, especially when we talk about muscle action. We also know that muscles can only pull, they never push. And every movement has an equal and opposite control. So when we're looking at this muscle man here, right? We see the anterior muscles and then we see posterior muscles. But one thing that we notice is that we're only seeing usually the superficial muscles. Superficial muscles means you're dealing with primary movers most of the time. They're very easy to palpate, so you can really see that they're closer to the skin and you can feel them, right? Examples would be like our deltoid muscle and also our pectoralis major muscle. Okay, so there's some examples there. And any superficial muscle that we're going to be talking about, again, they're going to be easy for you to feel. So during an exam, they're like deltoid. Oh, I remember deltoid is my shoulder muscle. Just go ahead and touch it. Try to flex it by lifting your arm laterally, right, and lifting it up to the side. You have options. Superficial muscles are going to be like the big obvious motions that you're doing in your body. Okay. Now let's talk about the deep muscle. This doesn't mean super, super deep to where you can't see them. Sometimes it just means right underneath the superficial muscle. Okay. It's going to be for stabilization. It's going to help with posture. It's going to help with that fine control. So it's going to help with controlling joints as well to make sure that we're supporting the movement in any way we can. So whether we're going to be a fixator, synergist to help support that overall primary mover or agonist, we've got options there. Some examples are going to be our internal obliques and our gluteus medius. So we have our gluteus medius here. See, we have our gluteus maximus, basically deep to the actual gluteus maximus here. And then we're going to have our internal obliques. When we go here, here's our internal obliques. Again, the fibers are going at an angle. That's what they're called an oblique. Internal because they're going to be deep, okay, to the actual rectus abdominis muscles, and also, again, to our transverse abdominis muscles. Why does this matter? Well, again, you want to be able to guide palpitation. You want to be able to feel the muscles that people are saying they have pain. And also it helps us understand why some muscles are going to be able to have those big movements and be primary movements, and why some are there to stabilize and help the movement go along. But one important thing as well is that it's going to help us understand and avoid vessels, blood vessels and nerves, to make sure you have a good mass of that muscle for injections. So for example, a lot of times you're not going to inject on the gluteus maximus because there's a lot of nerves there. but you can inject on the gluteus medius. Okay, why? Because there's not a lot of nerves and you still have a good amount of mass from that muscle. And the front layer, or the anterior muscles, and the posterior muscles work together to make movement happen. Some of the anterior muscles, like the pectoralis major, okay, is going to be an agonist, whereas the latissimus dorsi is going to be the antagonist, helping the moving your arms up, for example. So we have options there as well. Okay. The reason why I'm bringing this little slide here is because next we're going to get into our muscles list. So make sure you have that muscle list, get organized, make sure you're understanding that the origin and insertion is very, very important, but we also can think about origin and insertion helping us figure out location as well. If I know the origin of this pectoralis muscle and I know the insertion point on the humerus, then guess what? I can probably deduce the location is going to be on the chest wall. Because when we get into our muscles list, remember folks, you're going to have to know the origin and insertion, and of course the function/action, also the location for very specific muscles. But for all muscles, you need to know the location of it. So if you're just given any muscle to be able to name in lab, you need to know the location. That's the beauty of lab this week, because you get a chance to focus on the actual location of all these muscles using muscle models. Okay, folks, I'll see you in the next video. We'll get into our muscle list.